We're in Shelby, North Carolina, exploring the many faces of GM muscle from 1964 through 1984. It's all right now on Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. I'm Steve Magnante, hot rod historian, author, and lover of all things cars. I travel all across the country to uncover the forgotten and hidden gems of the automotive world. And now, I'm on the hunt for the next Roadkill Junkyard Rescue project. This is Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. On this episode of Roadkill's Junkyard Gold, we're in Shelby, North Carolina at Sundell Auto Specialties. In this 10-acre collection of GM muscle cars, I hear talk of an aluminum engine Chevrolet, an Oldsmobile machine, a tri-power Pontiac, and a very special Chevrolet made just for NASCAR fans here in the South. And as always, we'll be looking for the next Roadkill rescue. While the sun is out, the birds are chirping, let's get started. The Chevy Corvair arrived in 1960 as Chevrolet's lowest-priced economy model. At that time, there were no Chevelles. They came along in 64, and there were no Novas or Chevy 2s. They come along in 62. Now, initially, the Corvair was sold only as a wagon and as a four-door, but for 1962, a two-door was added, and so was a turbo. How do you find out if you're looking at a turbo car? You see the word Spider right here. But to see that turbocharged engine, we don't look here. That's the trunk. Corvairs were rear engines. We go to the back. And there it is. That's the turbocharger right there that bumps this engine from 95 to 150 horsepower. A lot of times this equipment is troublesome, people remove it, and it's rare to see one of these things intact in the junkyard. The carburetor is kind of unique. This is a Carter YH series side draft carburetor. That's right, it's not a normal up and down draft. It runs sideways, similar to the carburetors used on 1953 and 54 Corvette inline six-cylinder cars, although they had three instead of one of these carburetors. But being a side draft is not affected by turns and cornering. The floats don't get confused. The turbo motor also has heavy-duty forged connecting rods and pistons, and this is the motor you want in your Corvair if you're building a hot rod carbureted engine. Now that turbocharger makes 10 psi of boost. These cars have a very special instrument cluster to keep the driver informed. The turbo cars all came with a gauge package, including a manifold pressure gauge, which told the owner how much boost the turbocharger is making. And of course, all of these cars have a 120 mile-an-hour speedometer versus the 100 mile-an-hour speedometer found in non-turbo Corvairs. Tachometer reads to 5,500 RPM. And the most important gauge of all is the cylinder head temperature gauge. This reads up to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Keep in mind, the Corvair's Flat 6 is an air-cooled engine. There's no radiator, there's no liquid coolant. So if you're driving these too hard, it is possible to overheat the engine with too much boost and too much temperature. This is there to warn the driver to calm down a little bit. Now, these turbo Corvairs were sold with manual transmissions, either a 3 or 4-speed stick, no automatics. This one is a 4-speed, and it's just in such amazing original condition. You don't find them like this in the junkyard very often at all. We've featured a lot of Corvairs in our travels all over the country here on Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. We showcased the swing axle and how it works at Bernardston Auto Wrecking last year. We saw how the fan works at Turner's Auto Wrecking in Fresno, California. And then we even crushed a Corvair van in Vancouver, Washington. It was sad, but it had to happen. But this is the first time I think that I've ever seen a fully intact turbocharged Corvair. This is one of 6,480 turbocharged Corvairs built in 1964, but the total run on turbo cars was just about 50,000 units. These were pretty popular between 1962 and 66, which was the production run on these cars. And keep in mind, along with the Oldsmobile Jetfire, the 215 V8 powered car with a turbo, the Corvair Turbo was America's first mass-produced turbocharged car. And after all, in 1960, MotorTrend magazine voted the Corvair its car of the year. This car needs to be restored right back to factory stock, right down to the bi-spy tires, heavy-duty suspension, and 150 horsepower rating. I think it's a museum piece that deserves to come back to its full glory in showroom stock condition. This yard specializes in General Motors products, and the Corvair is a Chevy, but there's still lots of Buick, Olds, and Pontiac metal to look at. Let's get at it. I'm on the hunt for a roadkill rescue candidate. This thing here, this is like a 53 or 55 cab over C600. These are short wheelbase, and when I was a kid, these things terrified me. These remind me of Frankenstein's head coming down the road. Freaky. But this one here, a little too far gone, and being so rusty. I don't know. I'm gonna keep going. Not this one. Pretty cool. Mid-60s A-body convertible. Keep in mind that GM A-bodies were body-on-frame construction. That means when they were offered as a convertible, the frame had to be bolstered for extra strength. Let me show you what that means. This is called a boxing section. And while General Motors used the same basic frame underneath the hardtops and the convertibles, these were added to the regular hardtop frame to make a convertible frame. After welding the perimeter, it transforms the hardtop open channel frame into a boxed frame for the convertible. Now you might wonder, how much does this weigh? Well, Sundell sells dozens of these things every year, and the convertible frame weighs 335 pounds, or about 100 pounds heavier than the hardtop frame, but it's a small price to pay for doors that open and close properly on your restored convertible. See a couple of old Cutlasses here. These are not 442s. These are non-performance models with a 352 barrel. Interesting, but not muscle. But this, 3 letters, GTO, the great one. In 1964, the GTO arrived on the scene just in time to take advantage of the baby boom. Every single day, 10,000 American kids turned 18, and they wanted exciting new cars, and the Pontiac GTO is generally considered to be the first muscle car. Pontiac general manager John DeLorean really hit it out of the park by specifying a standard 389 V8 for the GTO, not the 326 that corporate rules mandated. Now, ordinarily, to find out if a GM muscle car is what it seems to be, we go to the cowl tag. Here we see 642027. That tells us this is a V8 Le Mans. Here's the rub. The GTO didn't get its own unique body code, 242, until 1966. That means that 64 and 65 GTOs are really hard to verify. For that, we have to add up the clues starting inside. In 1964, all it took was $295 to transform a V8 Le Mans into a mighty 389-powered GTO muscle car. It also included heavy-duty suspension, brakes, and inside, right here above the glove compartment, we see the 3 holes where the factory GTO badge would have gone. That was GTO only on 1964 cars. Now, a lot of folks would say, yeah, but GTOs were all 4-speeds, right? Not so much. You paid $184 extra for the 4-speed transmission. This car had the optional M31 Super Turbine 300, and that's a 2-speed automatic from the Buick parts bin. A lot of guys also say, yeah, but GTOs, bucket seats and a console, right? Not always. The base interior had a bench seat that we see on this car here. And this car also was born a 2-door post that's been chopped out of here, but we see the full door frame on the driver's side. That tells us this was a bottom-of-the-line Le Mans 2-door sedan, which was certainly possible with the GTO option. Externally, John DeLorean and the GTO design team went with a less is more strategy. 3 simple letters on the rear quarter panel, GTO, which stands for Gran Torissimo Omologato, which is Italian for a homologated race car, taking its cues from the Ferrari 250 GTO of 1962. Purists hated it, muscle car enthusiasts loved it. The muscle car was born right here. The 1964 GTO had a 1-year-only hood and grille with horizontal quad headlamps. For 1965, 6, and 7, Pontiac went with a different scoop on the hood and stacked quad headlamps. But there were also big changes on the trunk lid. We see them here. The 64 trunk is a 1-year-only deal. It has a straight down lip. The 65 trunk has a fluted edge to it. There's also a change in how the fuel filler worked. We go here, and in 64, there was a flap that pulled down here. Behind it, you would find the fuel filler. For 1965, the flap was eliminated, and the fuel fill was put behind the license plate on the rear bumper. Now, this GTO, if it's a real one, is a first-year edition of a very important muscle car. If this were my car, well, all we have here is the body shell, no frame. But keep in mind, GM muscle cars are body-on-frame construction, and because the VIN is on the body, legally, we can find a frame and make this car complete. The thing that turns me off about this car is the automatic transmission. That slows the car down quite a bit. In fact, back in 1964, Pontiac sent an automatic GTO to Hot Rod magazine for testing. They ran the quarter mile in 17 seconds, panned the car, it was slow, and taught them to send quicker cars to the magazines from there on. I think because of the amount of work involved, this car will have to stay right here. And I bet the guys from Roadkill would agree with me. They leave it here too. There's a lot more to see here at Sundell's. Let's keep looking. When the tail wags to the left, it's nothing. When the tail wags to the right, you're onto something. Right here, check this out. This one here is a numbers matching Nova. This dog has just detected that fact. I'm gonna check this out. These dogs have made me a lot of money over the years. Okay, go get him, go get him, go get him. That's right. It's a 12 bolt, 10 bolt, which one you got? Cool, SS 396 Chevelle, 1968. Big block power, 396 cubic inches, rat motor. These cars are quickly identified from 66 through 68 by the VIN, which starts with 138. Well, this is a concourse Chevelle station wagon. There's a lesson to be learned. These cars have a style code which also begins with 138. Unscrupulous Chevelle owners have been known to take a concourse station wagon tag and put it on a 307 Malibu and create a fake SS 396. Well, here's the rub. The concourse style tag reads 13835. That means station wagon body style. To be a correct SS 396 Chevelle, it needs to read 13817. So the cowl tag here only gets you half of the way there. Don't be fooled. By 1968, over 52% of the nation's population was under the age of 25. And a lot of those kids were buying muscle cars. And by 1970, the insurance industry realized a lot of those kids were crashing their muscle cars. This is a 1970 Olds Rally 350. It basically was Oldsmobile's way of giving the appearance of a muscle car, but at an affordable insurance price. Let's take a closer look. The heart of any muscle car is, of course, the engine, and Oldsmobile is well known for its 455 442. The trouble was, to get that thing insured would cost as much as the car payment. The Rally 350 came with one engine and one engine only, the L74 350 cubic inch small block V8. But with 310 horsepower and 390 foot-pounds of torque, it was anything but boring. On top, we see the Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor, which featured the small primaries for economical cruising and the huge secondaries for power at wide open throttle. Now, this was the same engine that Olds put in their station wagons and family sedans. It's not to be confused with the W31, which had 325 horsepower, was hand-assembled, and had an aluminum intake manifold. Not the same. This car does have minimal options. I see the manual drum brakes up front. Discs would cost extra. This has no air conditioning. Again, that would cost extra. With only 310 horsepower, the Rally 350 wasn't the most potent Oldsmobile of the bunch, but it was the brightest. Standard muscle car plumage included super stock 2 wheels, but instead of being argent like other Oldsmobiles, they were specially colored in Sebring yellow to match the rest of the body. And like any supercar from the 60s or 70s, tape stripe graphics were part of the mix. Flat black, a little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow to really make the body pop. And of course, Rally 350 stickers on the back to let the world know what you were driving. But more importantly, Oldsmobile did away with the chrome bumpers and went to urethane dip on front and rear bumpers, and then they painted them to match the Sebring yellow. It was one of the first applications of monochrome paint on a Detroit production car. The rear axle on these cars is also pretty special. The rear axle was also something special. Let's take a look. Thanks to the amount of rust on this one, that's an Oldsmobile Type O 12-bolt rear axle. A standard Cutlass would have had a 10-bolt, a smaller axle. Well, this here is a very rugged piece, the same thing that was used behind the 455 with 500 foot-pounds of torque. Inside of that is a 323 gear ratio, which is actually lower than the standard 308 gear that would have come with a regular Cutlass 350. Optional gears in these cars were 391s or 342s, but this car here has the 323s with limited slip differential. The transmission on the Rally 350 was one of 3 possibilities. Let's go see what we have. Okay, all right, well, that's the column-shifted automatic, which would have been connected to a turbo 350. Other options would have been a 4-speed on the floor, a 3-speed on the floor, or a Hurst his and hers shifter for the automatic. That his and hers deal had a dual pattern, one for him, with manual valve body use, and one for her, which allowed her to go right in the drive or park. Very chauvinistic, if you ask me. But other things I see here are the bench seat, the rubber floor mat, which you never see intact, and this fixed B-pillar This is an F85. This is Oldsmobile's cheapest model for 1970. And of the 3,547 Rally 350s built, only 160 were based on the Pillar Coupe F85. This is an incredibly rare car. And again, we see minimal options, maximum plumage. And this is how Oldsmobile beat the insurance rap in 1970. If this car were mine, well, this thing has so much rust and it's missing the trunk spoiler, the fiberglass hood, the front fenders, and again, that rust. You'd be into this car for hundreds of thousands of dollars if you really did it right. Why not put this thing on a platform, take it to the car show, put it in the victims category, and let people scratch their heads at how far this Oldsmobile has fallen? A lot more muscle here in the yard. Let's keep looking. Kind of cool. It's a 1970 Buick Skylark GS. GS stands for Grand Sport. You see right here on the fender the legendary red GS emblem, and it says Buick Division right there. Now, there was a step up from this. This would have a 350 with about 310 horsepower and 380 foot-pounds of torque. Up from this would be the GS 455, which made 510 foot-pounds of torque, the most of any muscle car of the era. Now, this would have motor mounts, brackets that look like this. These are stamped steel. They're plenty enough for the job, but on the GS 455, because of that 510 foot-pound rating, they used a very special motor mount adapter. Let's look at that. Now, I hear there's supposed to be a GS 455 here somewhere. This is not it. This car has a flat hood. Hasn't got the emblems. And this one here, well, it's so buried, I don't want to start digging, but we can learn from the style tag and see what this car is. And yeah, there it is, 446. This is a GS 455 in 1970. And yep, there it is. This is the heavy-duty cast iron motor mount adapter used only on 455 Buicks. The idea is that 510 foot-pounds of torque with the engine torquing in that direction could distort and pull the stamped steel adapter used on 350 and smaller engine cars. So we see it here on both sides. These cast iron mounts are proof positive. This is a GS 455. Pretty rare car. This kind of looks like a Pontiac GTO convertible. No, it doesn't say 242. This is a Le Mans with a GTO hood, looking like a GTO convertible project car, but I'm not fooled. In 1978, General Motors downsized their A-body platform in search of better fuel economy. It was kind of boring at first, but by the early 80s, well, high-performance models started to reappear. Who can forget the Monte Carlo SS with its NASCAR-inspired arrow nose with a standard 4-barrel 305, or the Buick Regal, which gave the power of a V8, but the economy of a V6 thanks to its turbocharged 231 V6. But this is something I've never seen. This is a 1980 Chevy Malibu M80. These were built only in 1980, and as the name implies, Malibu 80, but also this suggests a firecracker, a quick car, an explosive performance package. Remember, this car came out about 4 years before the Monte Carlo SS, so really there was nothing in the Chevy lineup that spoke performance. So dealerships in North and South Carolina took it upon themselves to come up with the M80. Now, externally, these cars were all white with blue rally stripes over the hood and the trunk. The distinctive horizontal striping here that says M80, and on the back, these had a fiberglass tail spoiler similar to a Z28, but not the same. We also see here something that was standard on all of these M80s, dual exhaust. These are a takeoff of the 9C1 police package, but they were brought straight out instead of sideways out behind the rear tires for a little more visual appeal. Now, the M80 was far more than just a sticker package applied to a Malibu. These were very serious under the hood. The base Malibu engine for 1980 was the pathetic 229 cubic inch 6 with maybe 105 horsepower. Not on the M80. Every one of these cars came with the LG4 305 4-barrel V8 with 155 horsepower. And it's gone. This one also has the F41 heavy-duty suspension, which is part of the 9C1 police car package, which is also where some of the parts of this car came from. And it's something pretty cool. These tubular struts, which go from the engine crossmember to the radiator crossmember, which adds stiffness to the front of this car. The roadkill guys couldn't hurt this thing. Inside these cars, they were available with either a 4-speed or an automatic. Okay, this is confusing. All right, this hole here implies a 4-speed on the floor, but it is so rude and jagged, roadkill wouldn't even do this. This is somebody's work. And, well, this clutch pedal, that is not factory. The steering column tells all. This was a column-shifted automatic car. But keep in mind, a couple years later, the Chevy Monte Carlo SS, totally automatic, no 4-speed. So you can only imagine how rare and exciting a 1980 4-speed would have been. If this 1980 Chevy Malibu M80 were my car, well, I think it would have to be restored. Keep in mind, this is a dealer special in the same way that the 1969 Dan Gurney Special Cyclones were, or the California Special Mustangs were in the 1960s. 1,901 of these cars were built for the North and South Carolina dealer region. These are very special cars. I think I'd go 4-speed and LS1 power instead of the 305 and the automatic on the column. And I know the Roadkill guys might want to snap this one up, but here's the deal. This actually belongs to one of the Sundale family. It's a personal project. They're going to restore it. Sorry, guys, you can't have it. But there's still lots of gold here at this yard. Let's keep looking. Chevy 2 4-door. Keep in mind, when these things have 4 doors or 2-door posts, they're not Novas, they're Chevy 2s. Gotta get it right. Oh, this is kind of cool. The Buick Sport Wagon. This is Buick's cousin to the Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, notable for its glass-paneled roof and longer wheelbase and room for 8 people. There's 3 rows of seats in these things. And to make sure they always stopped, Buick put the best brakes they had on these things. This is a 1968, so this has the 9.5-inch aluminum drum brakes right here. This is standard fare on all of these Vista Cruiser and Sport Wagons. And the beauty of these is if you have a Pontiac GTO or a Chevelle SS306 with the optional drum brake, the aluminum drum brake, you can find them on these cars. It's another source for these things. Instead of going to the swap meet and paying $500, you might find them on one of these wagons. Oh, come on, that's an SS396. No respect. As much as Freiberger and Finnegan love gassers and drag racing, I know that David happens to really dig off-roading and four-wheel drive vehicles. I say we take this International Scout and combine those two passions, drag racing and off-road. Hear me out. Back in 1969, Bill Jenkins, the legendary Pro Stock Chevy drag racer, was featured in a Hooker Headers ad saying he'd rather run an International Scout than run without Hooker Headers. It was a fictitious ad, but there was a great photograph in that showing one of these things bombing off the line doing a wheelie. It was trick photography. They used jack stands in that original picture. I say we take this thing here, recreate it into a replica of that magazine vehicle, but instead of using trick photography for the wheelie, make it really do one. We'd have to start under the hood. This is International's inline 4. This is half of the International 304 V8. Not a lot of horsepower and frankly not enough power to do a wheelie. The good thing is though, this engine bay is wide enough to accept a potent small block Chevy or maybe a big block because it's going to take that kind of power to yank the front end of this thing off the track. Inside, the interior of this one is built out for a manual transmission. The brakes, clutch, and gas pedal are already there. The transmission tunnel is ready to either be cut for a 4-speed or maybe we're lucky and one of those holes already works. Wind that thing to 6,000 RPM, dump the clutch, and it'll yank the front tires. But we're still going to need a rear axle. The rear suspension on the Scout is very simple, and that's good news. We can see it has a simple leaf spring, maybe add a leaf or two to stiffen them up so it doesn't hop. Now the axle is missing, but to put the power to the pavement, they need to find a 12-bolt rear axle from a Chevy Nova. It's about the right width for a Scout. Then they'll pack that axle with 456 gears, which will give just enough torque multiplication so when they dump the clutch, again, those front tires come off the track and we recreate that legendary moment from that Bill Jenkins Hooker Headers ad. And to finally cap it off, they got to get a case of rattle can white paint. That's because the vehicle Bill Jenkins used was a Comanche edition of the Scout, which was white with a gold stripe down the side, and that stripe's available in reproduction. But what I don't want to see is trick photography. No jack stands, no floor jacks. I want a real wheel stand. Dump the clutch at $6,000, yank those tires off the strip, and recreate that moment in Bill Jenkins' drag racing history. Guys, I know you can do it. Do it for me, do it for Jenkins. That's it for this episode of Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. We came to Shelby, North Carolina, and we spotted the first muscle car of them all, the '64 Pontiac GTO, Chevy's first mass-produced turbo car, Oldsmobile's insurance-beating Rally 350, and a very special Chevy Malibu M80 built just for North and South Carolina for the NASCAR lovers down here. And don't forget, Roadkill's Junkyard Gold is nationwide. We might be in a junkyard near you. Well, till next time, hasta Magnante.
Is it Corvair Tick 9?
It's Corvair. It ain't Corvair. I mean, that's all right. It's got some blood pumping here. Jumping jacks, baby.